last time we spoke about the 5 principles that constitute a great. Now, I'm going to reiterate them for all of y'all who didn't hear it the first time. These 5 principles are Vijay Nagasa's personal elements to how we qualify a person who deserves to be in one of that line of greats. A person who's in that throne of the age. A person who sits on that position of great influence, determining what that age is all about. So again, let's reiterate them. Point number 1, there's no originality. And originality speaks for itself. It's about somebody who comes through, studies what has been, and is able to put that together in a way that's individually themselves. Is able to come through and protrude with a style that doesn't immediately remind you of something else. So for all of y'all, if you've ever listened to an artist and you feel like Mkhumbuzo Banban, she's already flushed out of the originality aspect. So originality is when we're talking about the ability of an artist to introduce you to something you feel you've never really heard before. Of course, influence is infinite, and every artist was influenced by another artist. So that's the brilliance about originality. It's about taking zongeza elements and putting them together in a way that doesn't immediately remind or call forth to your predecessor. And that's an underrated skill, because a lot of cats could easily take the route of just being like who they're inspired by. As a matter of fact, if you're a real fan of the game, if you're a real fan of music and just hip-hop in general, you'll find that a lot of rappers had that phase of really finding oneself. But eventually a true great has to evolve beyond that. A true great has to mark out what makes them a unique individual. And if your great, if your GOAT doesn't qualify in the originality department, all I gotta say is maybe you should start reconsidering if whether or not you should start giving the baton to who he was inspired by. So we have originality in our top 1 spot, and then number 2, we've got emotional depth. Now, to break down emotional depth, it's the variety and the broadness of the human experience, catering to all aspects of what makes us people. Singabantu, we go through pain, joy, lust, ambition, drive, any emotion, you name it. And I think that an artist is ultimately marked by their ability to cater to all those experiences. It's one thing to cater to the club, because you understand the incentive that goes behind having a lot of hits as Jaivis Band. It's one thing to label yourself a conscious MC, because you're rejecting that need to always be in the club and you want to speak about the real issues. But what I feel makes a great is to be able to do both those things, to be able to broaden the spectrum and to say, listen, every person wants to be part of people's enjoyment. Every person wants their track to be langoma that makes people go crazy when they're escaping and they want to experience a happy in the capitalist construct. And every person, every artist wants to also contribute to laying a foundation of their opinion and their experiences in the modern age. A lot is happening in each point in time, and artists will always address that in their own way. So point number 2 is of course emotional depth, the ability to cater to that. So for me, a great is able to give us a whole human spectrum, make us dance, make us cry, make us reflect, make us think, but ultimately make us bond with them, invest in them, and call them a GOAT. So point number 3, this one is a contentious one, mass appeal. For me, we all have our favorites, but what really changes the ground when we can really speak about greats is notoriety. An artist has to be known amongst many. Why? This for me is beyond artists who are backed by the corporate machine, artists who are funded by capitalism, quote-unquote commercial artists. I think a great, no matter who's backing them, no matter what kind of infrastructure they're driven by, a great's talent and work will work and spread amongst the broader spectrum of the scene. I'll give you a fine example. Take an artist like, I don't know, Mos Def, a Yasin Bey. Now, Mos Def is mainly labeled an underground artist, but if you look at the depth of what the man has done and his work, you'll find that he speaks for such a broad range of people that if you asked the average person on the street, bet your bottom dollar or your bottom rand that the third or fourth person will probably know who Mos Def is. And this is not just on a surface, it's about how far your impact can stretch. How far can you reach the real people, the everyday people? So that's mass appeal. And then on our number 4, we're talking about technicality. Technicality is important, and probably one of the most important to break down, because a lot of people will assume that by technicality you mean a person's ability to deliver complex lyrics and layered metaphors. That's not what I'm talking about. By technicality, an artist has to reflect the fact that they understand how their unique voice, their unique style can relate with their instrumentals. So for me, technicality is when an artist displays a great insight in understanding how to present their style on any kind of instrumental. That's technicality for me. You've got to know what you bring to the instrumental, and you've got to know how to execute it. So whether we're talking about an Ifani or a Kendrick Lamar, this is not a lyricist discussion. Technicality is not a lyricist exclusive feature. Every artist is technical in their own way, because all the technicality means is thinking on the structure. Every artist who takes their work sincerely and seriously thinks on the structure of what they're bringing across. So number 4 way to applies to any rapper, even you, if you're an MC. Number 5, bringing it to a close. You can't have any of those concepts if you don't have, and this is a game changer, this is what makes ultimately a great: consistency. Because you can have the technicality, you can have the mass appeal, hell man, you could even have the originality. But if you, as an individual, are not able to study the times and find a way to constantly reinvent yourself through Ongamaklesha for the longest time, then you've lost out on that debate. So for me, a true great is somebody who from some, not some divine power, but some keen insight, is able to take every age, grow with the age, and give us great music and become what can be quoted as an intergenerational artist. Somebody who people from the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s and forward can relate with. And so if we're talking that, then obviously names start coming to mind. The Jay-Z's, the Eminems, the Busta Rhymes. We're talking about artists who the parent and the child could know simultaneously in the same breath. Why does that matter? Because it's goddamn hard to be consistent in the art world, where trends keep changing at a whim. And if you manage to give us at least 10 years, then we're talking about consistency. So there you have it, a top 5 yam.